couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Then I felt it. A spoon. If I stopped, I knew I wouldn't wake up.
The air was sharp. It felt like invisible needles poking the inside of my nose every time I breathed.
Dad told me we were going on an adventure, but adventures are supposed to be fun. This didn't feel fun. It felt like we were running away, even though we were just walking. My boots made a loud crunching noise on the white ground. The snow was everywhere. It covered the trees and the rocks and the path. It looked like the whole world was a giant cake covered in thick white frosting. It was pretty to look at, but it was a cold cake, a cake that would freeze your tongue if you licked it. I looked down at my coat. It is bright blue and very puffy. Mom calls me her little marshmallow when I wear it. I felt like a marshmallow now, a blue marshmallow trapped in a giant freezer. The zipper was cold against my chin. Dad's hand was wrapped around mine. His hand is huge. It swallows my whole hand up completely. Usually his hand feels safe, like a warm blanket. Today it felt different. He was squeezing too tight. His fingers were hard and stiff. I tried to wiggle my fingers to make him let go a little bit, but he just held on tighter. He pulled me forward, dragging my boots through the deep powder. "Dad, wait," I said. My voice sounded tiny. The wind took the words and threw them away before they could reach his ears. He didn't look at me. He kept looking at the top of the mountain. The mountain was too tall. It went all the way up into the gray clouds. It made my neck hurt to look at the top of it. It made me feel like an ant walking on a dinner plate. I saw a patch of snow that looked perfect. It was smooth and clean and sparkly. I wanted to stop. I wanted to make a snowball and throw it at a tree. I wanted to see it splash against the bark. I pulled back a little on Dad's arm. "No," Dad said. His voice wasn't happy. It was flat and hard, like a stone you skip on a lake. "Keep moving, buddy." He didn't smile. Dad always smiles when we go on adventures. He usually carries me on his shoulders and makes airplane noises. Today there were no airplane noises, just the sound of our breathing. The air tasted like pennies. My legs were getting tired. The snow was deep, and I had to lift my knees really high just to take a step. It felt like the mountain was trying to grab my boots and keep me there. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked. My stomach felt funny. Not a hungry funny, a scared funny. It felt like I swallowed a rock. Dad finally looked down at me. His eyes were wide. They moved around fast, looking at the trees, looking at the sky, looking behind us at the car, which was now just a tiny dot. He looked like he lost his keys, but scarier. He looked like he heard a monster. "Just a little further," he whispered. The wind was loud, but his whisper was louder. "Don't let go of my hand." I squeezed his hand back. The cold was pinching my cheeks hard now. I wanted to go back to the car. The car was warm. The car had the radio. Out here, everything was just too big and too quiet. I kept walking, but I watched the white mountain. It looked like it was watching us back. The mountain didn't stay quiet. It started to talk, but not with words. It began with a hum. It was a low, deep sound that I felt in my feet before I heard it with my ears. It traveled up my legs and made my teeth buzz against each other. It felt like a giant cat was purring deep under the ice, but it wasn't a nice cat. It was an angry one. Dad stopped walking. He didn't slow down. He just froze like a statue in a park. His hand went completely stiff around mine. It hurt my knuckles. I looked up at his face to see if he was mad at me for walking too slow. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring up at the sharp edge of the mountain peak. All the red color was gone from his cheeks. His face was the same color as the snow. He looked sick. He looked like he was going to throw up. "What?" I asked. My voice was shaky because the ground was shivering. He didn't answer. He just stared. Then I saw it too. The top of the world was breaking. A piece of the white sky was falling down. It looked like a waterfall, but it was made of heavy, thick powder. At first, it looked soft, like a pillow fight. It puffed up into the air like smoke.
But then it got bigger. It got so much bigger. It started to look like a giant wave at the beach, the kind that knocks you over and fills your nose with salt. Only this wave was made of ice and rocks. "Run," Dad said. It sounded like he choked on the word. Then he screamed it, loud enough to hurt my ears. "Run!" He yanked my arm so hard my shoulder made a popping sound. I tried to turn around. I tried to move my legs fast like I do in gym class. But my boots were too heavy. They felt like they were filled with cement. The deep snow grabbed my ankles and wouldn't let go. I took one step and tripped. I fell onto my knees. The cold wetness soaked through my pants instantly. It burned my skin. The hum wasn't a hum anymore. It was a roar. It sounded like 1,000 freight trains coming right at us from the sky. The white wave was taller than the trees now. It was eating the forest. I saw a big green pine tree just disappear inside the white wall. The tree snapped like a dry twig. The monster didn't even slow down. I couldn't get up. I was too small. The white wall was too fast. Dad grabbed the back of my puffy blue coat. He lifted me up into the air, his feet slipping and sliding in the powder. He was trying to throw me or carry me. I didn't know. The shadow of the wave fell over us.
The sun went away. The air got windy and cold, pushing against us like a hand. The whole world was just a loud, angry white mouth falling on top of my head. I closed my eyes tight and waited for the bite. The white monster didn't bite me. It punched me. It felt like the biggest kid at school ran full speed into my back, but 100 times harder. I didn't even have time to be scared before the ground disappeared. Dad was holding the back of my coat. I felt his fingers tight against my spine. Then the white, heavy stuff hit us, and his hand was just gone. It didn't slip. It was ripped away. I tried to reach back for him, but my arms were pinned to my sides. I was all alone in the cold. I wasn't walking or running anymore. I was flying, but not the good kind of flying like in a dream. I was tumbling. Up and down didn't exist. I was inside a giant washing machine set to the fastest spin. The snow wasn't soft powder. It was heavy blocks of ice and rocks that kept hitting me. I tried to scream for my dad, but the white stuff shoved its way into my mouth. It choked me. It tasted like dirt and cold pennies. It went up my nose and burned like fizzy soda. My eyes were squeezed shut, but I could still see bright flashes of white light behind my eyelids. My body felt like a rag doll. My left leg smashed against something hard. It felt like a baseball bat hitting my shin. The pain was sharp and hot, but I couldn't stop to hold it. I just kept rolling and spinning. The noise was so loud it didn't sound like noise anymore. It sounded like the whole world was breaking into little pieces. Then the spinning got slower. The heavy snow started to squeeze me. It felt like a giant snake wrapping around my chest, tighter and tighter. It squeezed the air out of my lungs. Then everything stopped. It didn't stop soft. It froze instantly. The snow turned into cement. I couldn't move my finger. I couldn't wiggle my toes. I couldn't even blink. The white monster had swallowed me whole, and now I was in its stomach. It was dark, and it was so quiet. Things stopped. It didn't stop soft. It froze instantly. The snow turned into cement. I couldn't move my finger. I couldn't wiggle my toes. I couldn't even blink. The white monster had swallowed me whole, and now I was in its stomach. It was dark, and it was so quiet.
few days were dark. It was darker than my closet when I hide from thunderstorms. It was darker than closing my eyes under the covers. This dark was heavy. It sat on my eyelids and wouldn't let me see anything. I waited for the world to start moving again, but it stayed still. I tried to stand up. I told my legs to push, but they were stuck in glue. I tried to lift my arms to wipe the snow off my face, but my arms wouldn't move. They were pinned tight against my ribs. The snow wasn't soft like when I make snow angels in the front yard. It had turned into something else.
Sensory, trapped, metaphorical. It felt like the sidewalk. It was hard and cold and angry. My chest hurt the most. I wanted to take a big, deep breath, the kind you take before you dive into the pool, but I couldn't. Every time I tried to make my lungs get bigger, the hard snow pushed back. It was squeezing me like a mean hug that wouldn't let go. I had to take tiny, shallow sips of air. The air tasted stale and wet. I needed my dad. Dad is the strongest person in the world. He can lift the couch with one hand when my toys roll under it. He could break this. I screamed, but it didn't sound like a scream. It sounded swallowed. The snow was pressed right against my lips. My voice didn't travel through the air to find him. It stayed right there, trapped in the ice with me. It was a small, pathetic noise. The oppressive silence came back instantly. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy quiet. It pressed against my ears until they started to ring. I could hear my own heart beating. It was going so fast, like a bird trapped in a box. It was so loud in my head. I started to cry, but the tears didn't roll down my face. There was nowhere for them to go because the ice was touching my cheeks. They just pooled in my eyes and froze against my eyelashes. The cold was seeping through my coat now. It felt like wet fingers touching my skin.
Despair, cold, helpless, alone. I was just a little kid in a concrete blanket, and the lights had gone out forever. Despair, cold, helpless, alone. I squeezed my hands into fists, but I couldn't even feel my gloves anymore. I was all alone in the wall. My right hand was the only thing that belonged to me anymore. The rest of my body was gone. My legs were part of the mountain now. My left arm was lost somewhere in the heavy white stone. But my right hand was still mine. I could feel the inside of my mitten. It was fuzzy and damp. I wiggled my pointer finger. Then I wiggled my pinky. They moved. They only moved a tiny bit, but they moved. It felt like scratching at a steel door. I tried to move my head forward. The ice didn't touch my nose right away. There was a space. It was a very small space. It was smaller than my cereal bowl. It was a hollow spot in the hard snow. I remembered a show my dad watched on the couch. It was about men climbing big rocks. He told me about air pockets. He said if you are trapped, you have to find the bubble. The bubble is where the air lives. He said it keeps you safe until the rescue dogs come. I tried to push my face into the bubble. I wanted to make it bigger. I rubbed my nose against the wall of the hole. The snow was packed tight. It felt like the ice from the freezer that is too hard to scrape off. It scraped my skin.
I breathed out. My breath hit the ice wall in front of me and came right back into my face. It was warm. It smelled like the peanut butter I had for lunch. The warm air made the ice melt a tiny bit. A single drop of water rolled down and touched my lip. It tasted like dirt and old pennies. I started to cry again. I didn't want to, but my eyes just did it. The tears were hot. They felt good for 1 second. Then the cold monster ate them. The tears stopped running and turned into little sharp rocks on my cheeks. My face felt stiff, like a mask I couldn't take off. It was so quiet in my little bubble. The loud noise of the mountain was gone. Now there was only the sound of my own breathing. It sounded loud and scary. I closed my eyes, even though it was already pitch black. I pretended I was in a fort made of blankets. But blankets are soft. This fort was trying to freeze me. I was just a tiny speck in the middle of the ice, breathing my own air over and over again. My side felt like someone was poking it with a sharp stick. It hurt every time I took a breath.
I tried to twist away, but the mountain wouldn't let me move. The heavy snow held me tight, like when my big brother wraps me in the rug and won't let go. But this wasn't funny like the rug. This was heavy and hard. I tried to find what was hurting me.
I pushed my right hand down along my ribs. It was very hard to move. The coat was smashed flat against my body. My fingers felt numb inside the mitten, but they brushed against something bumpy. It was my pocket. I remembered the morning. Mom put a snack in there. She said I needed energy for the big hill. I pushed my hand inside the zipper. It felt terrible. It was wet and slimy. The strawberry yogurt cup had exploded. The cold slime squished between my fingers and soaked into the wool of my mitten. It felt like stepping on a slug with bare feet. I wanted to wipe it off, but there was nowhere to go. Everything was just me and the snow. Then my thumb hit something hard. It wasn't the plastic cup, it was metal. I hooked my fingers around the handle. I pulled. The wet wool stuck to the fabric of my pocket. I pulled harder. My shoulder made a popping sound. Finally, it came free. I brought my hand up to my chest. I couldn't see anything in the dark, but I traced the shape with my other hand. It was the spoon from our kitchen drawer, the heavy silver one. It felt so solid. The snow was crumbly and the yogurt was slimy, but the spoon was strong. It didn't bend. It was real. It was a treasure. I squeezed it as hard as I could. I felt a little bit of brave come back into my chest. I wasn't just a soft kid anymore.
Determined, brave, empowered. Now I had a tool. I moved the spoon close to my face. The metal was freezing against my cheek. I whispered to it. My voice sounded shaky and small in the dark hole. I told the spoon it had to help me. I told it we were going to be a construction crew. We weren't going to wait for the dogs. We were going to dig our way out. The dark was heavy. It didn't just cover my eyes. It felt like it was pressing inside my ears and nose. I tried to look for the sun, but there was no sun. There was no up and no down. I felt like I was floating in black water, even though the snow was crushing me tight. If I dug the wrong way, I would go deeper into the mountain. I would never be found. I would stay here until I turned into a skeleton. I remembered a show I watched with my dad. It was about climbers. The man on the TV said the mountain tries to trick you. He said you have to use your spit. It sounded gross, but I didn't have any other ideas. I gathered the water in my mouth. It tasted like blood and the strawberry slime from my pocket. I opened my lips just a little bit. I let the spit fall. I waited to see where it went. It didn't fall away from me. It trickled right down onto my chin and slid into my scarf. It felt warm and sticky. That meant the ground was behind my head.
That meant the sky was in front of my face. I tightened my hand around the silver handle. My mitten was wet and slippery, but I squeezed until my knuckles hurt. I lifted the spoon. I jammed it into the hard wall of snow right above my nose. It didn't feel like snow anymore. It felt like the ice on the sidewalk that breaks your shovel. It was frozen solid. I pulled the spoon back and scraped. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, vibrating all the way down my arm. White chips broke off. They fell straight into my eyes. I blinked hard. The ice melted on my eyelashes and stung like soap. I wanted to rub my eyes, but I couldn't move my arms that much. I just had to blink and cry the ice away. My fingers started to burn. The silver spoon was sucking all the heat out of my hand. It felt like I was holding a piece of fire, but cold. The pain went up my wrist. I wanted to drop it. I wanted to put my hand back in my warm pocket, but the air was getting heavy. It was hard to pull into my lungs. It felt thick, like breathing through a blanket. I couldn't stop. I told my hand to stop being a baby. I scraped again, then again. I was just a mouse scratching at a wall. The mountain was so big and I was so small. But I had my spoon. I chipped away another piece of the monster.
One scrape at a time. My arms stopped listening to me. They didn't feel like arms anymore. They felt like two heavy bags of sand hanging from my shoulders. The silver spoon slipped out of my mitten. It didn't make a noise when it hit the snow near my knees. I tried to pick it up, but my fingers were too stiff. They were curled into claws and wouldn't open. I leaned my head against the ice wall. I just wanted to rest, just for a tiny second. The air had changed. It wasn't crisp and cold like it was outside. It tasted thick. It tasted warm and stale, like the air that comes out of a balloon when you let it go. Every time I breathed in, it felt like I was breathing in something that was already used up. It didn't make my lungs feel better. It made my chest feel tight, like I was wearing a shirt that was 2 sizes too small. A dull pain started behind my eyes. It was a slow thumping, like someone was hitting a drum inside my skull. Thump, thump, thump. It matched the slow beat of my heart. The pain made me dizzy. The blackness around me started to swirl. It wasn't scary black anymore. It was soft. It looked like velvet. The cold stopped hurting. That was the weirdest part.
The biting freeze that stung my nose and toes went away. Instead, a warm, fuzzy feeling wrapped around me. The snow didn't feel like ice. It felt like the big, fluffy pillows on my parents' bed. It was inviting me to lie down. It promised that if I closed my eyes, the headache would go away. The fear would go away. Everything would be quiet and safe. My eyelids felt heavy, like they had little weights glued to them. I let them droop shut. The darkness got deeper and warmer. I saw colors behind my eyes, purple and orange circles floating in the dark. The voice wasn't real. It was inside my memory. It was my dad's voice from our camping trip last year. He looked so tall standing by the fire. He told me the cold is a liar. He said the snow tries to trick you into thinking you are warm right before the end. My eyes snapped open. The velvet dark wasn't friendly. It was trying to kill me. I needed to wake up. I needed to hurt. I put my top teeth over my bottom lip. The skin was dry and cracked. I bit down. I bit down as hard as I could. A sharp sting shot through my jaw. It was a bright, hot pain that cut through the fuzzy feeling. The taste of iron filled my mouth.
It tasted like sucking on a handful of pennies. The warm feeling faded. The cold came rushing back, biting my skin again. I was shivering, but I was awake. The air was still bad. It was poison air. If I didn't break through the roof soon, the balloon air would choke me. I fumbled in the dark until my claw hand found the spoon again. I couldn't sleep. I had to breathe. The poison air was still making my head thump, but I had to dig. I lifted my arm. It felt like lifting a heavy bucket of water. I scraped at the ceiling of my snow hole. The snow wasn't soft anymore. It had turned into something hard and slippery. It was a sheet of ice. I needed to break it. I needed air. I jammed the silver spoon into the hard spot. I pushed with my shoulder. I pushed with everything I had left. The handle didn't stay straight. It gave up. I felt the metal fold inside my mitten. It felt weak and wobbly, like a loose tooth right before it falls out. I pulled my hand back fast. I brought the spoon close to my face in the dark. I couldn't see much, but I could feel the shape with my other hand. The spoon was bent almost in half. It looked like a broken neck. A cold feeling started in my tummy. It wasn't the snow.
Terrified, despair, panic. It felt like a huge spider was running around inside my stomach with prickly legs. My heart started beating so fast it hurt my ribs. The spoon was the only thing I had. If the spoon broke, I was just a kid in a hole. I couldn't dig through ice with my fingernails. The white monster would keep me forever. I started to cry, but the tears froze on my cheeks. I had to fix it. I took the bent part in my other hand. My mittens were soaked through. They were heavy and smelled like wet dog. I tried to bend the silver back. It was hard. The metal was cold and stubborn. I pushed gently. I was so scared it would snap in two. Slowly, the spoon grew straight again. It wasn't perfect. It had a weird bump in the middle now. It was crooked and sad. I started to scrape again, but I had to be careful. I couldn't push hard. I had to chip away tiny pieces of ice. I scraped slower. My hands didn't feel like mine anymore. The cold had eaten them. My fingers inside the wet wool felt like pieces of dead wood. They were stiff and clumsy. I told them to move, and they moved, but I couldn't feel the spoon handle against my skin. I just watched my arm going up and down in the blackness. It looked like a machine part that didn't belong to me.
Determined, exhausted, disconnected, sensory. I was just a pair of eyes watching a wooden hand try to save my life. I let the spoon drop. It didn't make a noise when it hit the floor. The snow just swallowed it up. I couldn't lift my arm anymore. It felt like a sandbag. I leaned my head back against the wall of my hole. The ice was hard through my hood, but I didn't care. I just wanted to close my eyes. When I closed my eyes, I tried to pretend I wasn't in the white monster's belly. I tried to see my room. I thought about the blue rug with the stains on it. I thought about my Lego castle in the corner. It wasn't finished. The great bricks were still in the clear plastic bin. I had left the little knight standing on the drawbridge. I told Mom I would clean it up before dinner. A lump grew in my throat. It felt sharp. I wondered if there would ever be dinner again. The bad thoughts started to crawl in. They were worse than the dark. I thought about Dad. I remembered seeing him right before the snow fell. He looked so surprised. He didn't look like a dad then. He looked small. If the mountain could throw a car, it could break a dad. Maybe he wasn't digging for me. Maybe he was gone. Maybe the whole world was gone and buried under the white, and I was the only person left alive. The thought made my chest hurt.
Despair, alone, overwhelmed, helpless. The mountain was miles and miles big. It was a giant. I was just a kid with a bent spoon. I was smaller than a bug to the mountain. The cold changed then. It stopped biting my skin. It went deeper. It felt like I had swallowed a glass of ice water, and it was sitting in the bottom of my stomach. It spread out from my tummy to my chest. Then the shaking started. It wasn't like the little shivers you get at the bus stop. It was violent. My whole body jumped. My knees knocked together hard. My teeth clicked against each other so fast it sounded like a rattle. My head bounced off the ice wall behind me. It hurt, but I couldn't stop. It felt like someone was grabbing my shoulders and shaking me as hard as they could. I wrapped my arms around my chest to hold myself together, but even my bones were shaking. I was broken. The shaking made everything hot for a second, but then it made everything wet. That was the worst part. My body heat melted the snow that was touching my skin. The white powder turned into water. It trickled down the back of my neck. It felt like cold, slimy worms crawling under my shirt. My winter coat was supposed to be waterproof, but it gave up. It felt heavy and soggy, like a wet dog. My jeans were the worst. They soaked up the ice water and stuck to my legs. They felt like hard shells.
I was lying in a puddle of slush, but I couldn't get up. I couldn't dry off. It felt like being in a bathtub full of ice cubes, but there was no drain, and the sides were miles high. The noise in my head got louder. My teeth were smashing together. It sounded like the little toy marching band I saw at the parade once. The drums and the clicking. Click, click, click. It was so fast. I tried to bite down on my tongue to make it stop, but my jaw didn't listen to me. It wasn't my face anymore. It belonged to the cold. I tried to curl into a ball. When you are scared, being a ball is better. You can hide your tummy in your face. But the snow around me had changed. It wasn't soft anymore. Because I melted it and it froze again, the walls were hard. They were like the ice on the driveway that you can't shovel. The space was shrinking. It held me straight. I pushed with my elbows, but the walls didn't move. I was stuck. I was a statue. I was a frozen statue holding a bent spoon that didn't work. The spoon was glued to my mitten now. The ice had welded us together. I looked at the gray plastic of the handle. It looked sad.
We were both just waiting in the dark, turning into ice. I was mad. Being scared makes you quiet, but being mad makes you loud inside your head. I looked at the white wall right above my nose. It was the monster's belly. It had swallowed me whole, but I didn't want to stay in its tummy anymore. I wanted to bite my way out. The spoon was still stuck to my mitten. The ice had glued it there tight, so it was like I had a claw instead of a hand. I didn't try to pull it off. I lifted my arm. It felt heavy, like I was lifting a big bag of groceries. I punched the ceiling with my spoon claw. It didn't feel like soft snow. It felt like the hard stuff that grows on the back wall of the freezer. I scraped it. The noise was terrible. It sounded like a fork dragging across a dinner plate. It made the hairs on my arms stand up. Ice dust fell into my open eyes. It stung, but I didn't blink. I didn't want to close my eyes. I wanted to hurt the monster back. I jabbed the handle up as hard as I could. A big piece broke off. It fell right on my forehead. It felt like a rock, but it shattered into cold powder on my cheeks. I waited for the dark to fill the hole, but it didn't. The hole looked different. It wasn't pitch black like the rest of my cave.
It was gray. It was a soft, glowing gray. Then I saw a tiny spot in the middle of it. It was smaller than a ladybug, but it was bright. It hurt my eyes because I had been in the dark for so long. It was the sun. The sun was looking for me. It was poking a finger through the snow to touch me. My heart started hitting my ribs really fast. I forgot about my wet pants. I forgot that my toes felt like wood. I started digging like a dog in the backyard. I scratched at the ladybug light. I scraped until my shoulder burned. I needed to make the hole bigger. I needed to fit my head through. The white monster was trying to keep me, but the sun was stronger. I wasn't a statue anymore. I was a machine. I shoved my arm up as high as it would go. The snow grabbed my elbow, but my hand broke free. It felt like I had punched through a wall into a different world. Inside my cave, the air was still and heavy. Outside, the air was angry. The wind hit my skin instantly. It didn't feel like air. It felt like 1,000 tiny needles poking me all at once. I tried to wiggle my fingers, but I couldn't feel them.
Sensory, pain, loss, vulnerable. I looked up through the little tunnel I had made. The bright light hurt, but I squinted. My red mitten was gone. The jagged ice had pulled it right off my hand when I pushed through. The spoon was gone too. It was just my bare hand sticking out of the mountain. My skin looked wrong. It wasn't pink or white. It was the color of a bruise. It was a dark, ugly blue. It looked like a dead thing. It looked like a zombie's hand coming out of a grave in a scary movie. I stared at the fingernails. They were purple. I was scared that if I touched them, they would snap off like dry twigs. Help, I tried to say, but my voice was broken. It wasn't a yell. It was a tiny squeak like a mouse getting stepped on. The wind blew the sound away before anyone could hear it. My throat felt like it was full of sand. I coughed, but that just made my chest hurt. I didn't pull my hand back. I was afraid to lose the light. I kept my blue fingers spread out wide. I pretended my hand was a flag. I waited. I hoped a bird would land on me. I hoped a big airplane would fly over and see the weird blue spot on the white snow. I hoped my dad's walking nearby. I hoped he would see my zombie fingers wiggling and know it was me. I'm here, I whispered to the wind. The cold traveled down my arm.
Sensory, cold, despair, vulnerable. It went into my shoulder and then into my heart. I was turning into an ice cube from the outside in. My blue hand was lonely out there in the cold. I knew I had to go with it. The hole wasn't big enough for a boy, but I didn't care. I had to get out of the dark. I pushed up on my toes. The snow under my boots was hard and slippery like spilled sugar. I shoved my head into the tunnel. The ice was tight. It pressed against my forehead and the back of my neck at the same time. It felt like the mountain was trying to chew on me. I pushed harder. The jagged sides caught my ears. It scraped them down. It felt like sandpaper rubbing against my skin. It hurt so much that I wanted to scream, but the snow was in my mouth. I squeezed my eyes shut and shoved with all my might. My head popped out. It felt like I was a worm wiggling out of a rotten apple. The first thing that hit me was the air. It wasn't the stale, wet air from my cave. It was sharp. It rushed into my nose and burned the back of my throat. It smelled like nothing. It smelled like empty space. Then I opened my eyes. The pain was instant. The sun was shining on the snow, and the snow was acting like a giant mirror. It was blinding. It was brighter than the high beams on Dad's truck.
My eyes watered immediately. The tears ran down my cheeks and turned cold before they reached my chin. I blinked and blinked, trying to make the white spots go away. I looked for Red. I wanted to see Dad's big red coat. I wanted to see him running toward me. But the world was empty. There was nothing but white hills. They rolled on forever, like a blanket that someone had shaken out and left there. There were no trees, there were no houses, there were no footprints. The sky was a scary, deep blue. It looked too big. It felt like I was the only thing alive in the whole universe. I tried to climb out, but I stopped. My shoulders were too wide. The ice grabbed my coat and held me tight. I kicked my legs in the emptiness of the cave below, but they didn't hit anything. I was stuck. My head was in the freezing bright world, and my body was dangling in the dark. I felt like a head on a stick. The wind rushed over the hills and slapped my face. It was so quiet. It was the kind of quiet that hurts your ears. I was just a little spot on a giant white sheet, and nobody was coming to clean me up. I twisted my shoulders hard. The ice didn't want to let go. It held onto my coat like a bully grabbing my shirt.
I kicked my feet in the empty dark underneath me. I kicked until my boot hit the hard wall of the tunnel. I used that wall. I pushed. My coat scraped against the jagged snow. It made a sound like a zipper closing fast. My stomach slid over the sharp edge. My knees hit the surface. I pulled my legs out one by one. I was out. I rolled onto my back. The snow up here wasn't soft like in the movies. It was hard and crunchy, like the crust on old bread. The sky was terrible. It was too big. It stretched over me like a giant blue bowl. There were no clouds to hide behind. I felt like a tiny bug on a white dinner plate waiting to be squashed. The sun was hot on my face, but the wind was cutting through my wet clothes. It felt like invisible knives slicing my skin. I tried to stand up. I told my legs to move, but they didn't listen. They felt like heavy logs of wood. I couldn't feel my toes anymore. I couldn't feel my knees. I was just a heavy sack of potatoes. So I crawled. I dragged my body across the crusty snow. My elbows dug in. The ice crystals bit my wrists. Then I saw it.
It was a tiny speck of color in the big white world. It was red. It looked like a drop of blood. It was very far away. I blinked my burning eyes to make sure it was real. The red dot was moving. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't a tree. It got bigger. It turned into a shape. It had arms. It had legs. It was running toward me. I stopped crawling. I couldn't move anymore. My breath made little clouds in front of my face. The person was yelling, but the wind stole their voice. I couldn't tell if it was my dad or a stranger. I couldn't tell if they were angry or happy. It didn't matter. I was too tired. The snow felt almost warm now. It felt soft, like a bed. I looked at my right hand. My fingers were frozen into a claw. They were purple and blue, but they were holding something tight. It was my metal spoon. It was bent. It was scratched, but I still had it.
The mountain tried to eat me, but I used my spoon to eat my way out. I closed my eyes against the bright sun. The red dot was coming. I held the spoon against my chest. I beat the mountain.